Ross is not only a mover and a shaker, but also such a charming and kind man. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah, so I was here today also for the Gaia Trust board meeting, and it's really special to come here to this place where there is so much energy streaming into the world and moving so much in the world. So great thanks to Gaia Trust and to the impulse behind Jen. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm here tonight. I just heard from 2 people already that they watched the TEDx talk, the link that Ross sent around. So maybe some of you have watched it, and it relieves me in a way of needing to do a presentation. I will still do one, but I also did a presentation earlier today for the Gaia Trust Board, and I felt like doing something different tonight. Yeah, I think that there is, as the Ecovillage network is growing constantly, and especially the impulse behind the Ecovillage is spreading, because the impulse behind it is really of people who are saying, we're not on this planet to destroy life. That's not why we came here. We came here to be guardians of life and to be caretakers. And we want to live our potential in the very, very individual and special way that each one of us carries into the world. So, and we want to find ways to do that. And we meet young people all the time who say, I'm not willing to be part of the old system at the moment. I want to be part of the new. I want to be part of solutions. Yeah, and this is a spirit that has really born the Ecovillage network. And I thought tonight, instead of me speaking so much about it, that I would like to read to you some of the voices from the Ecovillage book. So some of the voices from Ecovillages around the world, and also share with you little bits of inspiration from Ecovillages around the world, but also some of these voices. So not my voices, but the voices that come from the field. So I'm going to wear my slightly askew reading glasses because I broke them on a longer journey that I've been on before coming here. And I'm going to read and talk at the same time. And I'll see whether I can also handle this technology. Let's see how I do with all 3 together. Okay, it worked before. But
it's working in your other computer, by the way, not in your computer. You're changing the other computer.
Yes, you change. Put it on there.
Is this the one?
yeah, or maybe you just do it.
I
You can just do
remote
it.
control.
That's wonderful. Yeah, so I want to start with Findhorn because this is where I live now. And it's one of the older, the grandmother communities of the movement. A few years ago was the 50th birthday, and it's really amazing to see how the impulse has grown into the world, because part of what Eileen Caddy's dream was to create a network of light around the planet. And I say it was her dream, but actually it wasn't. She herself, these weren't dreams, they were insights that she had. So when she connected in meditation, she had insights. And one of the insights was that there would be a network of light streaming around the planet with its foundation in Findhorn. But also that there would be a huge community growing at Findhorn that would touch thousands of people. And that was when it was just her and Dorothy and Peter living together in a caravan in the sand on the beach, So she always said, had I known that this is what my actions would lead to, I would never have started, because she wasn't a great lover of speaking in front of great groups of people. But she did all that. Yeah, and there's a beautiful article in this book. And I just want to read one little piece, because now the 4 dimensions of Ecovillage design, social, cultural, or worldview, ecology, and economy have become so well known around the planet. But actually they were also born in Findhorn. And yeah, this is from Robin Alfred, who's also my husband. lucky me. And he says, what interests me most about the 4 dimensions of the eco-village, a concept that, if not created here, was certainly pioneered here by John Talbot and others, is not so much the brilliance of identifying the social, economic, environmental, and cultural dimensions to sustainability, but attending to the stillness at the very center from which they all derive. In the words of Eileen Caddy, do you want to do something to help the world situation? Then look within. As you change your consciousness to love, peace, harmony, and unity, the consciousness of the whole world will change. Yeah, and this is just an example for something that is true of so many eco-villages, that at their center there is very deep impulses that move the people to set them up, because actually it's a big thing to start a new life, to step out of the normal way of living, out of our habits, and to start living a different life. Yes, I think I'll leave it at that for Findhorn, and let's travel on to Kitesh in Russia and listen to a few words about Kitesh. Yeah, Kitesh was born actually also by someone who did a course in Findhorn. So just again, it goes to show how much inspiration our eco-villages seed in the world. There's a lot that we seed that we don't know about. And this is by Andrew Eichmann, one of the main managers of Kitesh at the moment. And he writes, the care and nurture of children is the purpose of life in Kitesh. Officially, Russia has about 700,000 social orphans. Their biological parents are often still living, but have, usually because of alcoholism, been declared unfit to parent their children. And this is a child speaking. Sometimes my mum didn't come home for days, and there wasn't anything to eat in the house. I went to my Gran's, and she fed me. When my mum came home, Gran shouted at her, but it didn't make any difference. Every nation has its social casualties. Yeah, so it's another of the impulses behind many of our communities, is to really answer to the challenges and the questions that our societies pose. A real deep felt wish to reach out and to offer support. And we're very touched at the moment by how many eco-villages, for instance, are working with the refugee situation in Europe, especially here in Denmark, but also in Germany and in other countries across Europe, in Greece, where there is a lot of hospitality being offered and welcoming to the refugees arriving to Europe. Let's move on. Damanhur, Italy. And from here I'm just giving you small glimpses, small pieces to the puzzle. Damanhur, which has just faced one of the big questions also many communities face, and in a way Jen might face at one point in time, and has faced in a small or in some way with Hilder's death last year, which is what happens when the founding energy moves through the veils or moves into a different plane, and they're not here in our physical reality anymore. What happens to communities when their founders die? And this has happened in Findhorn. Dorothy McLean is still alive, now in her 90s, an incredible old lady that goes for her daily walks through Findhorn and sits in the sanctuary and meditates and exudes, I would say, sweetness of heart wherever she goes. And Damanhur, which is an amazing community in Italy, they've built a temple into the mountain, which is 80 meters deep. If you haven't been there, you have to go. But they just, so this is an image of one of the temple halls. And that's the way they really deepened the web of the community by doing something incredible together. But their founder died last year in spring, very suddenly. And this is what they write. We are a community with a founder who had a very clear vision. In such communities, there lies a risk that after the founder's death, everything collapses. In Damanhur, this was not the case. In winter 2012, wow, it's much longer ago. In winter 2012, Falco was diagnosed with cancer. He decided to use natural therapies and not to undergo chemotherapy. He used every moment of his remaining time, 3 more months of life, to prepare for his departure, conversing with all Damanhurians, and there's 1,000 of them, leaving things so they could continue serenely without him. In those months, he was more present than ever, and he was teaching and speaking in public until his final days. And she's speaking about until 3 days before his death. When Falco died, all of Damanhur felt the loss deeply. We became aware of how much responsibility we each carry. We came together more fully as a community. Even now, we sometimes read what Falco wrote shortly before his passing. Messages with the intention of keeping our motivation high and reminding us of the love he felt. We are in the process of transforming Damanhur more deeply than ever before as a living piece of art. Yes, thank you. And I won't read with each picture because there's too many. Yeah, but this is Inshi Gökmen. She and her husband they work as professors at the Technical University in Ankara. And they've been mothering and fathering the Ecovillage network of Turkey for so many years. And they've just come under, you could, in the shooting line, you could say, of the Turkish government, because they speak out also about things that are happening in Turkey, both with the refugees and with the Kurdish people. So they're speaking out a lot. Very courageous people, and working with eco-villages in Turkey. And actually with the emerging network of Gen Fertile Crescent, which is the countries in the Middle East feel that the name Middle East is given to them through colonialism. So the countries there have decided that they would like to use the name Fertile Crescent for the eco-village networks that are emerging there at the moment. Yeah, but we can move on to Sekhem, one of the communities that is inspiring Jen deeply at the moment, because the whole community is based on the concept of an economy of love, that we are able to earn our living in such a way that anything we do heals nature, how we use resources actually heals nature, that anything people do as they create the products needs to heal the people, and the products need to heal society. And that's an economy of love. And it's totally possible. So this is what Sekhem is showing. And Dr. Ibrahim Abouleish, who's a dear friend, he's also on the advisory board of GEN and the advisory board of GEN Africa. And he received the Alternative Nobel Prize amongst other prizes. And this is the deep vision he saw when he first came to the piece of land just north of Cairo, where Shechem was born. He said, "I carry a vision deep within myself. In the midst of sand and desert, I see myself standing at a well, drawing water. Carefully, I plant trees, herbs, and flowers, and wet their roots with the precious drops. The cool well water attracts humans and animals to refresh and quicken themselves. Trees give shade, the land turns green, fragrant flowers bloom, insects, birds, and butterflies show their devotion to God, the Creator, as if they were citing the first surah of the Quran." Yeah, and Russ was just with us on a visit to Shechem, and the vision has come true. It's a green oasis in the desert with flowers attracting birds and butterflies. That's exactly what we saw there. But 30 years ago, it was a desert. And today, Shechem works with 800 organic farmers all around Egypt, producing organic teas, organic medicines, organic food stuff. But also, they've just 4 years ago, because all the income that is created from these is reinvested for the well-being of the community. So they have a big health center. And just 4 years ago, they started building a university for sustainable development. And at the moment, they have 800 students. The first group of students is just finishing their first degrees in different areas of sustainable development. So this is happening in the Arab world and the Islamic world. So let's see where we go next. Yeah. Natun in Togo. Yeah, founded by a truly wonderful lady and her husband. They went to France to study and then came back as intellectuals to their country, and instead of staying in the main city, which is what they were meant to do according to their culture, and work at the university or in a government institution, they went back to their villages and started transforming life in the rural areas. And this is very unknown of. And she writes, "In the early days, the village meetings consisted of speaking men and listening women. Although they were not prohibited from speaking, women never felt their voice worthy of being heard outside the home. One day, the men were talking about the desert and how there was nothing that could be done to stop it spreading. Similar to the great nothing from the never-ending story that devours everything. This is when it happened. A woman spoke up. It reminds us of some women, doesn't it? She explained that if bushes and trees grow on barren land, they can regenerate topsoil with the shade their leaves offer. The fertile earth can allow millet to grow again. Stunned silence followed her words, and life changed in the villages." Yeah. So they've created amazing community banks, especially between the women, where women share funds that come in and support each other as they set up projects. So they have a very strong network around that. And yeah, we're doing actually a lot of, we're starting to do more and more networks with greening school projects. This is an approach that is now working with around 600 schools in Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, but also Kenya, Tanzania, and now Uganda. starting in Rwanda as well. And in Africa, the old, or the way of doing things at schools learned through colonialism also, where things were very much about cleanliness, is to sweep the schoolyard every morning. So this is done with great focus and concentration, and over the years the topsoil is swept away and swept away again and swept away again, and you can really see then when the rain comes as well, and that helps to erode the topsoil and flood it down to the rivers and down to the ocean as quickly as possible. So the rivers have now become brown, not just in Africa but all over the world. We've become more used to the image of brown rivers. They're not meant to be brown. And you can often see how the classrooms, how the soil actually goes down on the edge of the classrooms, like 0.5 meter lower. So the idea here is to reverse that process, because for hungry children to come to school, a school that is embedded in barren land is not a very healthy situation. So the school children learn about seeds, they learn about planting plants, they learn about the abundance of nature, they learn about water harvesting, about solar energy, and through all of that they start to re-educate their communities. So it's a way of starting at the school but then transforming whole communities. Yeah, please, next one. Yeah, the Gambia is another amazing story. This is Morris and Jerry. They actually also came to Findhorn and were inspired by Findhorn, and then went to the Gambia to start an eco-retreat center there. But the special thing is how they started it, because in the Gambia, all the communities on the coast lost their land because the coastal lands were the government decided that these should be kept for touristic development. And they could only get back the land if they had a good business plan for touristic development and the funds to invest. And of course the communities it's very hard for them to do this. So most communities in the Gambia have seen huge touristic buildings going up, and their cultures have changed very, very deeply, especially the coastal villages I'm speaking about. And right in the south, close to the border to Casamance, there's a community, there's a little corner kind of left, and a community called Kartong. And this is where they started the center, and from the beginning saying that this land and this project is being passed over to the local community. So the local community is running it with them. And after a while, the community became more and more interested, and they actually I was invited to go there with my husband for our honeymoon. And we had talks with them and with people from the community, and they said they would love an eco-village design education to come, and they would like to transition to becoming an eco-village. So right now in the Gambia, we from that first course, a second course was created, and now we're working with 13 villages along the coast that are all transitioning to eco-villages, just as an example of what can happen. The Gambia has a big gift to offer the world. Gambians know how to live together peacefully, even with different cultures and religions. And it's a simple sentence, but it's actually a big thing. I don't think I've ever been to a village other than Kartong where Islamic, Christians, and tribal religions live so closely together and in such harmony and constant exchange. So it's really one of the big, powerful, beautiful, historic strengths that the Gambia has to offer and to teach. Yeah, let's go on. And we've spoken often before about the interesting situation in Senegal, where the government has a government program to transition 14,000 traditional villages to eco-villages. So these are some of them. And it's an interesting conversation where top-down and bottom-up strategies meet. But I think I won't go deeper into that now. If you're interested, we can ask more questions about that later. So let's go on. And again, let's move on. I mean, we're working in different favelas. Maybe I'll just say about this one, the beauty of working through music. That's what this eco-village transformation here is based on. That they're bringing back peace and life and culture to the favela through music and building community through music. And this is about a community of indigenous people who've become surrounded by the city, have lost their original lands and are reclaiming their traditions and living their way of life in city environments. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this I would like to share with you. It's a little piece about this village, San José Tapartado in Colombia. A small village that has decided to remain peaceful between the warring factions in that area in Colombia, between the guerrilla and the government forces. In March 1997, brutal fighting took hold in the region of Apartado in the north of Colombia. Guerrillas and paramilitary forces chased the farmers off their lands. Both groups use a terrible technique known as burnt earth that destroys houses, forests, and rivers. In the small village of San José, around 1,000 farmers, trade unionists, and refugees have come together to form a peace community. They adhere to rules of nonviolence, determined to stay neutral between the two fronts and work with tools of peaceful resistance. The immediate danger is all too real. Over the years, violence has claimed the lives of 200 members of the peace community. Every family in the village has at least one murdered member, whether a parent, child, or sibling. The state does not protect them. On the contrary, they are being suspected of being supporters of the guerrilla. In spite of every adversity, the peace community continues. Together, they succeed in growing organic cocoa and bananas. International support helps to protect the community. The village is free from weapons and has become legendary among the surrounding guerrillas, military, paramilitary, and drug lords. Edouard Lanchero, this is him, Edouard, who was the leader of the community. He accompanied the peace community from its establishment in 1997 until his death in June 2012. Yeah, so maybe you can just go back for one moment, please, sorry. Yeah, and I think this is something where we're reaching out more and more also to communities that are living in very harsh environments, And it's not an easy thing to hold in a network, or, even just sharing this information here, to really connect to connect on some level as deeply as we can to what this really means, and to grow a global solidarity with communities. So it's also beautiful in the network when we hear, like not long ago there was a hurricane heading towards Bangladesh, and we hear from our friends in Bangladesh, the hurricane is coming, we fear for the worst, please pray for us. And then a few hours later, we heard that it had calmed down slightly before it reached the coast, and only a few people were killed. But it's very intense. So this is also the Ecovillage network that this is an hour.
You want some dialogue too?
I do. I really do. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to stop soon. Yeah, so that's also part of what the Ecovillage network is about. And I think I could just stop there. Maybe I'll stop actually with one more. If you move forward a few pictures, yeah, and then to the picture of, and further, this is also beautiful, but this one of the farm, because Albert Bates is such an old friend of Gaia Trust, but also of the Ecovillage movement. And I just love what he said about the hippies, because there's still this image of the Ecovillage network that we're a bunch of hippies, yeah, and we've definitely grown beyond that. But it's also interesting to hear what Albert Bates has to say about the hippies. He says about the beginning of the farm, also one of the first eco-villages in Jen. Behind our parents' backs, we sampled the liberation of the pole and the forbidden fruits of psychedelic sacraments. So that's the true hippie image we have. We were not inclined towards aggregations of material possessions or dominance over nature. We marched for peace, honesty, and justice, left our universities and the allure of white-collared jobs to become nomads, questioned everything and everyone. They called us hippies, a word that comes from jazz. Hip was brought to this country through the West African Wolof language, word hepikat, hip, and it means one who has his or her eyes open. Yeah, so I'll end there. I could share more stories, but I think it just gives you a taste of the different voices alive in the network, and also a taste of the different communities. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Barbara. That was a rather different presentation of the Global Ecovillages Network than I've heard before. A very poetic one.
Very different, yeah.
So let's hear if anybody has a comment or a question. I'm sure you have. Yes.
Yes, the feeling I get from all these dives into centers around the world that you just presented. It's like, a diamond being turned, turquoise, red, etc. I'm just wondering, how do you see the generations growing up inside the villages? You just fast forward 5, 10, 20 years, and at the rate of the speed of change now, it's almost impossible. But on a cellular level, how do you see the generations growing up? Because I remember in the kibutzes in Israel, those who were born there, they stayed there. But those who came in there from outside, who had seen something else, it was more difficult to say that. So, yeah, the generations growing up.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Thank you, Peter. And I love the image of the diamond with the different facets. Yeah. Well, I had a really interesting experience one day when I was in Berlin, and I was sitting in a cafe with a large group of friends. And there were quite a lot of young people in the group, and we were just having a coffee. And I was visiting friends who'd lived in Berlin for a while. And after a while, the behavior of one young woman became noticeable to me, and I didn't quite know why. I just found her very awake, very sensitive to small signals, and very smooth in her interactions and generous. And these were just... And then I found out that she'd grown up in a community. And since then I've seen that again and again. And I'm not saying all communities are paradise and all children growing up in communities are angels. I'm not saying that. But I think Ecovillages are growing up an amazing group of young adults. And May East and I were just sharing about our kids growing up and what they're doing right now. And it's amazing beings. And there's definitely a different capacity to think less individually, to feel yourself less as an isolated individual and more as part of a whole system. And also the ability to read signals and to interact and to communicate beyond the surface. Those are things that I have noticed. Yeah, and we have a strong next-gen movement, and a lot of these actually come from Ecovillages. It's surprising, like I just said today, I always thought my son would grow up and then go into a revolution against what I've taught him, you know? I taught him to be, like, we were vegan for many years, and you know, but now, today, my son, who's 19, is studying sustainable development, you know, and because he wants to communicate the eco-village and similar experience to the mainstream, he finds that really important. He's totally on fire for it. And my daughter has just decided to become a vegan, you know. It's like something's different in this generation. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Franz.
Isn't there also a trait of problems with the young people staying in the communities? I think there is from Crystal Waters that some places the young people don't stay.
Yeah, I think it's really a question of how alive the communities are. So, like, Tamara doesn't have a problem with the young people staying. They might have a problem with being swamped by young people. Or at Findhorn, I think there's an interesting process happening where usually young people move away from Findhorn, but many of them after, say, 5 to 10 years are actually returning. So we're currently having a whole return movement of youth who've grown up in Findhorn, who really want to, once they hit the age of family and children, that's when they know this is the time to move back to community. So that's happening for young adults there. So I think it's different for different communities, but yeah.
Comments? Yes.
Yeah.
I just want to add one brief comment to your opening statement. What do you do with the young people in the villages? I happened to be at the farm many years ago. And Al Bates told me that's our biggest problem. We kick our young people out, but they come back.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
the only conclusion is that the farm is now 1 million people, so they must have succeeded to get rid of some and get them out.
Yeah.
But it is definitely a problem.
Yeah.
They have such a wonderful life, excitement, and why should they go out without some excitement?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Marlene?
I would like to ask, what does it actually take to become a member of the Eco-Village network? I mean, if a village wants to become a member, I mean, how do you qualify for that?
Well, we were speaking about it today briefly, you know, that the eco-village definition, we've really changed it over the years. And currently we see an eco-village as a process, not as an outcome. And the process is that a group of people comes together and says, we want to design our own pathway into the future. We're not going to allow the current forces of habits of the past and greed of the past to dictate how we live our lives. So we're going to design more intelligent, because we're intelligent as human beings. We can create so many solutions. So we're going to design ourselves. And when a group really comes together and starts in earnest, that's where the eco-village process starts. And then very often there is a particular entrance place. Sometimes people come at it more from the social aspect or the cultural aspect or the environmental aspect or the economic aspect. So very often there's an entrance door, but we also see that over time, eco-villages develop all 4 dimensions, always, because it's holistic. Life is holistic, so life creates itself in holistic ways. So to become, for instance, in Gen Europe, to become part of Gen Europe, you can sign up as an Eco-Village initiative. To become a full member of Gen Europe, you need to have lived together with a group of adults of at least more than 8 for at least 2 years. So to become a full member, it's more. But this is also different for the different regions of Gen. But you can liaise with Gen as an individual, so you can become a supportive member or a friend of Gen, as we call it. And we have possibilities for volunteering for Gen or just being engaged in different forms. Yeah. Yes, Rolf.
I was particularly moved by this, the Peace Village individual, and the story of what's his name, Falco from Daman, who facing his own departure, really focused on. And I think somehow it was good, or not good, but it was also moving that it claimed his life. It seems I don't know if he died in the line of fire, but anyway, he died. This Mexican, and I think at some point
he did.
That I get this image of beans versus bullets kind of thing, in the Eco-Village versus his, and I'm thinking about the Brexit. The Britain is perhaps stepping out of the European Union is like, and I understand both parts in that, and like we need a totally new kind of union. I don't know if you could sort of speak into this place of courage beyond death, and can we find a new way to come together to maintain Europe as a peace initiative that perhaps reflects a new vision of also eco-village kind of thinking translated into a whole civilization? Do you understand my question?
Well, it's a big question. I feel that has several questions kind of in it. But I think this courage beyond death is what sticks with me. And I think that for many of us who live in eco-villages or are deeply connected to eco-villages, that there has been a point in our life where we took a big decision for change, for transformation. And in a way, that's a small death. And I think, again and again, if we really change the habits in our life, it's a small death that we die in doing that. So it takes courage again and again to face what needs to change in our lives. And in a way, I want us, I wanted to, maybe it's good to also bring this question to all of us, whether we live in eco-villages or not. But what are the points in our own life where we can change something? Where there's a habit in our own life that we would like to change. Where in our social networks could we build community or be more honest and transparent in how we communicate? Where could we offer healing to the groups that we are a part of? And ecologically, of course, there's many questions we can ask in our life, but also culturally, how connected are we to cultural roots, and how open are we to learn from the places in between cultures where there is new insights emerging, those fruitful areas between cultures? And economically, how do we earn our money? How do we earn our money? And is it in sustainable ways? Or is there a way we could move closer to an economy of love that maybe includes ourselves even as part of that love system? Like, how do we take care of ourselves in our work also? So many aspects like that. So I think there's courage in so many moments in our lives that is needed. And I think the question about Europe and the UK, I'm not sure how the vote will end, and I'm nervous about it. Personally, I would really appreciate if we stayed in the EU as the UK. Yeah.
Yes.
As I see the role of Global Ecovillages Network, you are facilitating and networking and sharing and educating with Gaia education. But have you thought about having a more progressive role? For example, as I see it, we need much more eco-villages in the African region and the Arabic region. So have you thought about having a more direct approach to the governments and decision makers in these countries to facilitate new eco-villages? Maybe have some kind of a team who would travel around in these regions and...
May, you could also go forward a bit. It's because there's more pictures. Yeah, thank you.
This one?
Yeah, just stay with it for a while. Yes.
So do you have any ideas how to move on and maybe a more progressive role?
Yes! Thank you for that question, because it was such a poetic evening. I feel like often I speak much more strategically than tonight. I just felt like trying out something different. But so yeah, we work towards it through many ways. One, of course, is just, as you said, spreading the inspiration more widely. So things like the Gen Solution Library, where by next year we should have 2,500 solutions in there, which are open source offered. Those are very simple ways of spreading information and supporting people. But concretely on your question, on the one hand, there's the visibility of the existing eco-villages, but then there's also the programs of supporting new villages. And we know that really every village should become an eco-village, and every city should become a green city, if we want to live sustainably on this planet. So how are we going to do that? So in Gen, we currently have 5 programs that we're formulating more strategically. One is the Eco-Village incubation process, which is for intentional communities starting up. One is the Eco-Village transition strategy for traditional villages transitioning to eco-villages. One is the greening schools approach, where we start by working with schools and then work to transform the whole communities. We have the emergencies program, which is rebuilding eco-villages, rebuilding communities after disaster, but also, for instance, bringing eco-village design processes to refugee camps or working with refugees in eco-villages. And that's quite a big area that we're looking at also, for instance, collective healing work and trauma release work, and developing educational programs around that in Gen. And the last one is around urban eco-neighborhoods. And our approach at the moment is to see that this is happening. All of these are ways of instigating new development that are already happening, but we're formulating it and creating supportive materials, very practical educational tools. So Jen is also developing, besides deepening the collaboration with Gaia Education, we're also developing own educational programs, some very practical programs that support communities in these processes. And we're using these strategy papers, one, to send out to the networks. So you are welcome to use these, translate them to Danish, and use them in your processes here in Denmark. And they're given out to the networks across the world. But also we're working very consciously. So we were in Cairo also to speak at a conference for the Ministers of Environment of Africa and reach out to them. So we're building personal connections to ministers, and we're going back to COP22 to deepen relationships in particular countries and inspire governments, because they need to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, they need to implement the climate agreements, and we can help them. Because often it's not easy for them to see how to really do it. Yeah, these are not goals that are implemented through top-down strategies alone, and Jen has something to offer there. Yeah, so that's what we're doing, and we can do with some help. Yeah, thank you. Good.
We have time for one more, at least.
Yeah, nice.
Helena?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just wondering what percentage of the eco-villages are placed in urban neighborhoods?
It's a relatively small percentage. We have a lot of people who are close to the Eco-Village network who live in cities. And for instance, from NextGen, there's a lot of people who live in, say, Berlin or London or Barcelona and are very close to Gen. So there's often like small communities coming out of that, or what we call community networks in cities. And of course, we're very close to the Transition Town network as well. So there is a lot of networking, people moving from the Eco-Village network to Transition Town back to the Eco-Village network, you know, until it really becomes like one, people-wise, it's really one network. But we're looking at the moment, so this urban eco-neighborhoods is something that we haven't formulated very well, and we're moving into that area more. Because I think it's very close to Transition Town, but it's still slightly a different impulse of really looking at how can a whole neighborhood do this together. And also, of course, we have communities in cities like Los Angeles, Eco-Village, or others. But it's, I would say, 5% of eco-villages worldwide. Yeah. Yeah, and we were speaking about it earlier today, that, you know, I think there's also something to be said, because at the moment there's such a focus on cities and also the sustainability of cities. And I do believe that if we bring in very healthy forms of social entrepreneurship, that rural communities can become very, very vibrant at this time, because with internet, we don't all need to live in urban centers anymore. So I think this focus on, oh, the whole world will move into cities and that's what the whole world wants. I think it's I was saying this afternoon, very often when I speak to the people who've moved in cities, like say in Kenya or in Senegal, they haven't moved there because they wanted to move into an urban center, but simply because they couldn't survive where they were. So, yeah.
Okay. I think we have the final question over here.
Yeah, I would just like to say something. I was very happy when you mentioned about Sikkim and the beauty of Islam. Because we have built up such a horrible picture of what Islam can be.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of when Senegal became beginning of the network down.
Oh.
And the man that I was married to that now is dead. And I so much want to honor him and honor what you are doing. And I will sing the first surah of the Quran, which I was taught in the villages because I converted to Islam. And this is.
Would you like to come here?
No, I stand here.
Okay.
And I do it the way I was taught to do it. And it says, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in ihdinas siratal mustaqim Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi waladdallin Amin alakulahu subirabin nas Malikin nas ilahin nas min sharril waswasil khannas allazi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas min al-jinnati wan nas. Amin Allah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kosha.
Yeah.
That was very enjoyable.
Thank you.
Informative. Thank you very
And
much.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.